Good evening and a warm welcome to one and all. My name is Shashwat DC, and on behalf of Azim Premji University, I heartily welcome you to yet another edition of Nature in Our Cities, a webinar series which is part of our broader Seeking Sustainability initiative. Today's talk is the fourth one in the series that we have. The first one was about birds. The second one, we met the Madras hedgehog. In the third one, we learned to live with the leopards. And today, we are going to talk about bugs. Bugs as in insects. Now, I really don't have to introduce the topic too much because we have very erudite experts, bug lovers or aranophiles, as Divya corrected me the other day. So we have three of them today. I'd just like to start off by introducing all of them. First, we have with us Vena Kapoor, who is working with the Nature Conservation Foundation in Bangalore. Welcome, Vena. We also have Samuel John, who is the co-founder of Spiders and the Sea, a social enterprise. And finally, we have Divya Uma, who's a behavioral ecologist at the Azim Premji University. She teaches biology at the undergraduate level. Thank you so much, Divya. So to begin with, the genesis of this talk actually happened with a study that had been undertaken by two undergraduate students at the university. They Saroja and Carol, under the guidance of Divya. Now, this study was very interesting. It was about a spider, or more so about a species of social spider, uh, which has a scientific name that almost makes it seem like a dinosaur. It goes by the name of Stegodiphyus saracinorum. Yeah, I'm sure there'll be a lot of jokes that will be made over my pronunciation later on. But apparently, this spider is a social species which they live together, thrive together, and they kind of live in a very nice structure, much like the ants and the bees that we know. The difference here being that out of the 50,000 known species of spider, there are only 25 of them that actually live in a manner like this, not eating each other for breakfast or having a after play munchie sort of a thing. So this study was very interesting, and it made me aware of how little we know about all this insectdom that lives and thrives all across, all around us all the time. And we bunch them all together. Imagine this social spider that we talk about. We'll just call it a spider without knowing that there are 50,000 species of them that live in this planet. Imagine the kind of insects that would be, millions and billions of them. I was reading one thing in the in the run up to this talk, that the insect world outweighs the human weight on this planet by almost like 70 times or so. So today, we are going to discuss insects and spiders. Spiders, because spiders aren't insects and they don't like to be called as one. There will be a lot of disclaimers that we'll be starting with, because we will realize that there's so little that we know, and there's so much we can know about them. And there will be a lot of interesting learnings and insights that await us as we explore the universe of the bugs that live around us. And without much ado, let me hand over the baton to Divya. Just one small request to all our viewers today: if you have any questions, comments, or anything interesting that you want to post to our panelists, just type it in the live chat panel, and hopefully towards the end of the talk we will be able to take that up, and and have let's hope so you have as much fun as I did in putting this together. So over to you, Divya, and your fellow aranophiles. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Shashwat. And it's really my pleasure to have this chat or discussion with John and Vena. It's really, I think that there's no other way to put it, because we really love actually looking at bugs or insects and spiders, all creepy-crawlies, and we share a special bond with them. So Shashwat, as you told, yes, there are going to be a lot of disclaimers. So I'll first start with that. Basically, we are not insect experts, as the posters say. We can say that we really like insects and spiders. We are really not the experts, but we really we're very fond of them, and we are still learning a lot about them. And we want to share some of our ideas and some of our thoughts with you here today. Second thing is that I'm just going to talk about a outline that we are going to talk today. So we'll start with how, why do we like these creepy crawlies when rest of the world try to kind of kill them and with a broom throw them away? Why do we actually are fond of these things? Then we'll move on to, why should we care about these tiny insects and spiders? Then finally, we'll talk about if somebody wants to get into, uh, if somebody is really interested in natural history and wants to know more about insects and spiders, what are some of the ways one can go about it? So that will be the sequence of the webinar, and then we'll take questions. So with that, maybe the format will be that I'll be asking questions to Vena and John, and then I'll also answer some of those questions. So Vena, we can maybe perhaps start with you with a question. So can you tell us about, why are you so fascinated with these small insects or spiders when rest of the world can barely stand them? We'll start with that.
Okay, thanks, Divya. And thanks, APU, for hosting this. I wish I remember the day and the month when I actually started, looking at spiders and insects. But roughly, it started around the summer of 1998. And this was just after my graduation and I got into my first job. And the organization there was looking at using spiders as biocontrol agents for agricultural fields, especially instead of using chemical pesticides. And so my then boss, she was working on spiders for her PhD. She had worked on spiders for PhD. And she said, do you want to, start looking at spiders and documenting them and helping us with this work? And I said, but I don't know anything about spiders. And she said, come, let's go for a walk. And so she took me for a walk in the little office garden that we had. And then she showed me, Divya, if you can put the slideshow up, please. She showed me this beautiful spider web that was there in the office garden. It was this shimmering and it had this intricate pattern. And I said, is this a spider web? And she said, yes. And till then, my visual kind of idea about spider webs were these messy kind of things that I'd seen in all these horror movies and movies which they show during Halloween, or these little, wheel-shaped webs. And so to see this was extremely, it was very, my jaw just dropped. And then she pointed to the middle of the web. Divya, are you showing the slides? Because I'm sorry, I can't see them as yet. No, not yet.
I'm sharing it. No?
Okay, maybe it'll take a little while to come up. And then in the middle of this beautiful, intricate web, and I would actually ask you to actually go and look for these spiders when you have a chance or when you go for a walk, because they're fairly common around us.
Can you see this?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. They're fairly common around us in our gardens. In these old buildings, you would see them. And when you go close to them, they're actually an architectural marvel. And in some sense, this is what started me on my journey of looking at spiders and just being completely fascinated by them. Because until then, the idea of being in a city, at least in Madras, was that you would see crows, you would see mynas maybe, or that was my worldview. And, wildlife and interesting, fascinating things were only found in faraway places, in forests. Or what my imagination of a forest was, these large trees and plush rainforests and things like that. And so to see these spiders suddenly all around me, just opened up a whole new world. And then I got an opportunity to look at spiders in Guindy National Park and to document them for the forest department. And they then, once they started looking at the number of species we were documenting, wanted us to do an interpretation center of the spiders and insects found in Guindy National Park. And this is a park in the middle of, a crowded Madras city. And the kind of wildlife that you would find in it is completely amazing. I don't know how it is now. I'm talking about, this is 98, 99, 2000. After that, I started, I went to Valparai and looked at spiders in rainforests, and again started documenting them. And during this time, I also started taking people for spider walks, doing spider slideshows. And every time it was really lovely to see the delight in people's faces when you would point out something, an interesting spider or an insect. And they would, very often say, "Oh my gosh, really, is this really a spider, or is this really, does this insect really look so beautiful? I've never seen this before. I always go for my walk in this area and I've never seen it. It is so cool and I really want to look at it more." Uh, Fast forward a little bit to more current times, and yeah, so and I started then taking walks around my office and home, which is in a relatively green, quiet neighborhood in North Bangalore. I started taking walks basically to, to get away from the post-lunch slump that all of us get, and I started just seeing so many things just on those walks, and it coincided with me getting finding out that my phone had a good camera, and so I started taking pictures and documenting them. My colleagues started joining me on this walk, and we started documenting just on that one small street with a dead end, at least I think around 12 to 13 species of mantids, uh, at least around 7 to 8 species of wasps, and numerous spiders, right? And so initially I thought maybe I was emitting a special spider or a insect or a wasp, some pheromone that was, that was attracting all these creatures towards me. But then a lot of my colleagues who came with me also started seeing these things, so my little bubble burst. Um, so yeah, but so my colleague Roshni started joining me on this walk. She works with me on a project that I'm currently working on trying to see how we can make more relevant, age-appropriate nature learning modules that can be weaved into the environmental science curriculum in schools. And so these walks, as you can imagine, just made our work so much more interesting and creative, and used to give us such fantastic ideas. That is until the pandemic hit. Yeah, so thanks, Divya. That was a quick kind of overview about uh, how I got interested in these creatures. And just a disclaimer again, through this conversation, we're not going to be talking about facts about interest numbers and those kind of things, but we want to kind of tell you about the how you can get inspired and have a sense of wonder and a connect with these creatures, and to pass this on to other people as well. Thank you.
That was great, Vena. I wish through this talk, I hope more people, who are hearing this, more people join you for these kinds of walks. Um, so, John, can you tell us about, how did you get into liking these creepy crawlies? Because I know that you are from an entirely different background. I mean, you worked in the advertising, sector for a number of years, and then suddenly you shifted to, working with spiders. So, can you give us some stories about what happened, what hit you?
Yeah, no, couple of things before I start. If you ever get the offer of joining Vena on one of her nature walks, please go. It's life changing, truly. You get to see stuff that you wouldn't even have imagined is there. But coming back to, well, yes, Divya, among other reasons, I think just in the way you put it, well, working with spiders, I can truly say I'm in better company uh, than when I was in the corporate. But without bashing my old job too much. Um, so for me personally, it was an interesting journey because even this whole sort of transition from doing what I used to do, which was chase money, to now chasing spiders, uh, the transition into this whole wildlife field, if you will. I'm again nowhere close to a very core person in this field, but even where I've gotten to today, sort of interestingly started with a spider. From what I've mostly heard from people, it's usually a tiger or a bird or one of those more enigmatic things. But I had an interesting start in the way I was inspired to start spending more time with nature. I came back home one day after work, frustrating as you'd imagine, back in that side of the world. I went up to my terrace where I used to stay in this little room. As I was walking through the terrace garden, I suddenly found myself covered, my entire torso was covered in a web. Now, I did what any brave young man in his mid 20s who's sort of raised in the city will do. I shrieked, I ran, closed the door. Some heavy breathing later, I was like, okay, now, we need to do the right thing. So I was like, where's my shoe? Or find a way to get rid of this spider that has built a web and has taken over half my torso. I was genuinely concerned for my life, right? Because what do I know? So then I came back outside and I found that the spider sort of crawled back into its hiding space. And I was like, where is that spider? Okay, fine, I'll get it tomorrow. But I went and found myself Googling, wait, where did that spider go? Where do like web building spiders go at night? And I found out that, they constructed at night, they disappear in the morning and they come back at night. Very basic information that I got, but fascinated me. I was like, why is the spider going through this process? So I Googled a little more. Then I found out they recycle their web. I was like, wow, what a sustainable little creature, And so slowly, bit by bit, that spider that was on my terrace, and I'm sorry if you could share the screen at this point. It all sort of started with that one spider where I started to look at it and I was like, hey, let's see what this spider does. And over a point of time, I went from wanting to kill the spider to being worried when it was raining if the spider's eaten enough. The rain's going to wash away the web. Maybe I should find some mosquitoes. And I then started my journey of photography, and you can see the stunning image I've taken of the spider, where you can make out that it has, well, legs. Um, but I was so proud of this photo. I was like, wow, look at its artistic value. Uh, but what I also started to do is, I was like, wait, let me see if I can take a picture of a spider during the day. Of course, this one wasn't available. And then this one was. So this was a picture I took with my phone. And I was like, wow, look at that detail. Oh, wow, look, it's killing mosquitoes. So wait, what is their role in like disease mitigation? I started asking myself some really vague questions. And from there, I basically spiraled into sort of falling in love with these creatures because as you spend more time with them, even for somebody who was so panicked when he saw spider for the first time, I started looking at them in a different light because they became familiar. They went from these unknown shapes and sort of ideas to suddenly becoming something that shared a space with me so peacefully, going about doing their own thing. So eventually, I upgraded my equipment. This was, I think, the second or third generation of that first blotch of light that you saw. And then I started to take pictures of spiders, which helped me sort of see the finer detail, which got me more curious, more reading, and it's a very happy, healthy spiral that you sort of go into. And from there, it's just been a slippery slope. If you see the next picture, that's in my mother-in-law's garden. This is a crab spider sitting inside her orchid. And well, my mother-in-law loves her garden, and it's the most beautiful thing you'll see in the city. And in the middle of that, when I found this tiny little crab spider, half the size of my thumbnail, possibly, I went and showed it to her. And now, well, I'm hoping that when she's, very excited about spiders, it's not just to be nice to her son-in-law, but I can see that sort of growing admiration or appreciation for things once you just sort of recognize that they're there. So that was the journey I went through, just to know that there are things out there that are unfamiliar, but when you dig a little deeper, the kind of secrets they tell you, they really enrich your life. And once you get into spiders and the little things, you start to notice all the little things. This was a little hopper that was pooping out honeydew in her garden as well, and I was explaining the whole cycle. So that's broadly, where I came from in terms of my love for these creatures and where it's gone.
Thanks. That was wonderful, John. Nice to know. Actually, I didn't know all these kinds of details also. So to tell you a little bit about, how I got into these creepy crawlies. Actually, I was not really fond of insects or spiders to begin with when I was studying, and I was completely oblivious. I think it was but I knew that I did not like what I was doing, which was biochemistry at that point, and I did not like the lab. So I wanted to see, something live and moving, something in action, which you could see the behavior of. So I was fascinated with. There are these very cool spiders, which we will show you later, known as which spiders which look like ants, which mimic ants. So this was back long time back in Center for Ecological Sciences, where one of the labs had these ant mimicking spiders, and that was really my first thing. Which and once you kind of get used to, once you see one of these critters, it's a whole new world, and you'll start reading more about that, and they're extremely fascinating ecology, behavior. I mean, you can literally study almost everything using these spiders or insects or other kind of organisms. So I think that was my calling. But of course, I think I like to read very old literature about natural history literature about these bugs, and then of course go out for walks with Vena and John. And just the other day we had gone walking in Cubbon Park, and we saw that on the railing, on the fence railing, there was so much action, and entire ecology course can be taught in that space. So I think there is a lot in the cities which we can explore, and that kind of brings me to the next question about why should we care about these tiny little insects and spiders. I mean, even they're so tiny, sometimes it's almost hidden, right? So you can't notice them. And why should we even care about it? So very quickly, Vena and John, if you can, maybe we can start with John. Maybe you can tell us about why do you think we should care about these critters?
No, absolutely. So I'll let you guys take the technical bits as the sort of more clued in folk. From my side of, like, from where I see it, I'd like to, like, from the philosophical side of why should you care about anything at all? Of course, there are sort of larger, well, they all form an essential part of the ecosystem sort of reasons. But more fundamentally, sort of learning empathy for other forms of life can really enrich your own life, right? And it's not just in this altruistic way where you just have to say, hey, I love everything, I'm going to respect everything, and I mean, it's great if we can do that, but even before that, that sense of appreciation can really take you places in your own journey and through life, right? Like you said, for example, when we went through Cubbon Park and we were just walking around, it was maybe 100-meter stretch that we did tops, but it took us an hour, or possibly more. And it took us that long because we were constantly looking at stuff that was blowing our mind. Whether it was the ant mimics running around near the ants, or some other hopper that we saw that looked like one of the ants. It, like, every time you go out, you see something new. Every time you go out, you learn something new. And that's a great thing to have in life, right? Like, that sort of connection with nature goes beyond anything that you can sort of directly associate value with sometimes. It just sort of grows you as a person. You start to look at other things differently as well, once you sort of learn that empathetic view. But another great reason why is, well, you don't have to spend all that money, travel to a nature reserve, and then go on a safari and then pay the jeep guy some money. You can literally just take a walk down your street, and I can guarantee you you will get your mind blown quite significantly. So from my viewpoint, that is a very good reason to start sort of caring about these bugs, right? Because there's this wonderful sort of well, magic happening there, if you will.
Yeah, that's absolutely. I mean, it doesn't have to have any application or value attached to it. Just the beauty which lies in these bugs are, that should be enough for anybody to like them.
Yeah.
What do you think, Vena? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, just to add to John, I think he's given a broader kind of a picture. Maybe it'll help if I give an example of how we're doing this and why we're doing this. Again, the empathy factor is very important, right? And we can see how both adults and young adults and even kids, you can, once they have that connect with smaller things, and they start asking questions about it, and or you push them to kind of ask questions, saying, So you don't just leave it at, trying to identify something or say it's a butterfly. Like, why is this butterfly's wings like this? Why is it sitting in this particular way? Why does a dragonfly have its wings outstretched, but a damselfly has it, against the body? Why are spider webs so different in shape and size? Why are some of them, built in the morning and why in the night? And you don't need to have all the right answers, right? The fun part of it is discovering along the way to get to a certain point where you think that, okay, this makes sense, or maybe I should look it up and see what more information I can glean. And the way we are doing this in our work, so I work in the Nature Conservation Foundation, and one of the things we're trying to do as part of the nature classrooms work along with my colleagues is to shift this very human-centric view of how nature is portrayed in the textbooks, and when teachers teach that in school and in classrooms, to shift that perspective a little bit. It's important to have that perspective, but to shift it also to have or to discuss that other creatures also are part of nature and use nature just like we use nature, and the importance of those connections. So for example, in our textbooks, typically you'll see chapters which say, what do plants give us? What do trees give us? They give us a thatch for our roofs. They give us the banana plant leaf is used as a plate when we eat. So what we do, and Divya, this is where I'd like you to bring up the slides, please. What we try and do is to say, yes, humans use this, but there are various animals and insects and birds that also use plants. And this is how they do it. And of course, depending on the age that we are kind of, working with, the age group of children that we're working with. Yes, I can. So we bring in, if you see the first panel brings in a human perspective, and then the rest kind of talks about how other animals and plants, other animals and insects and birds also use plants. And to see that shift both in the teacher and the student's head is really nice to say that, oh, we didn't think of this. Oh, that's really nice. And so it's nothing new, right? But we're trying to connect the dots in some sense and to get them excited. So to bring out this narrative that, leaves are also used for roosting. Leaf cutter bees use it to cut little portions of their leaf and to, line it as their nest. And also to bring out the fact that plants are not just trees, but they consist of shrubs and herbs and creepers, and all these different variety of plants are used by different insects and wildlife in our cities at different stages as well. So often these kind of simple and complex connections are lost in our textbooks, right? We have these very typical examples that we remember from our school where they show the butterfly illustration and say butterflies go through egg, pupa, and then a chrysalis, and then it becomes into an adult. But we don't think about where all the other insects also sometimes go through this process. And we often use the example of this web of life game, which is nice, but it makes the narrative into a very simple kind of a story. The complexity of nature and the adaptations and the resilience of nature is often lost in in our textbooks and in these games that we play. So for example, very late in life, I got to know that pollination is not just by butterflies, which is what is often in our textbooks, but pollination is also done by beetles, by ants, by moths, and by flies, and also mosquitoes, which we've recently found out. So even the pesky mosquitoes, which we don't like, are actually pollinators of some important crops. Just to give you an example again, I've documented almost 15 species of flies just around my house. And to just think of that diversity is quite mind-boggling, and to try and think about what each species is playing in terms of its function in this ecosystem, we still don't know as yet, right, the stories. And so we need to kind of make peering into shrubs, crouching and looking at pavements, tiptoeing and looking at something which is on a bark of a tree, just normal. And it shouldn't just be a few of us doing that and getting weird looks and stares. And yeah.
Thanks,
One more
Vena.
thing,
Yeah.
Divya.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah,
can I
yeah.
just add one thing? So one more thing to keep in mind is that also to acknowledge that it's okay if people don't like spiders and insects as yet, right? Even when you take them out, because some of it may be just an innate dislike for them, and we shouldn't, push people to like them, because as many people have a very innate fear for them, and we need to recognize that and to tell them it's okay. It may be also their experience growing up in a particular, in a particular environment where they've been disconnected from that completely. What we can do is help them maybe get over that fear by taking them for a walk, showing them pretty things, showing them some stuff, and telling them stories about it, right? Showing them a mantis, telling them about their vision, showing them the egg case of a mantis, telling them about the potter wasp that specializes in catching spiders and caterpillars, paralyzing them and dragging them back to their nest in order to lay their eggs so that their young ones have fresh food to feed on. Those kind of things just completely amaze people, right? And we don't say enough of those natural history stories, like you rightly pointed out in the beginning, Divya.
Yeah, no, that's really great to hear. Even hearing you speak about that, I am imagining all those things, and it kind of I feel nice about it. So I want to kind of talk a little bit from a slightly higher at an undergrad level. Why how you can use different insects and spiders even at the undergrad level, because John and Vena talked at a different level and different aspects. So at the undergrad level, you can use various kinds of spiders and insects. In fact, in India, it's very easy. You can just walk out of your campus or if your neighborhood and observe. You can start with observation. So you can build scientific or skills such as observation skills, and you can ask students to kind of who come from with a clean slate, so they would not have been exposed to any kind of looking at bugs. But what we can do is we can say that, okay, just go out and observe things, do that continuously over a period of a month, right? Any spiders, so spiders are web building spiders are really helpful for this, because they stay in a place, they can't fly away like insects. They stay day in and day out, they will stick around at the same space. So you can ask students to design, observe, come up with a simple question on their own, because once you start observing, you get curious, and almost every student can ask questions on their own. So that ability to ask questions and to think critically, I think is very important at the undergrad level, because instead of assuming that, okay, spiders build web, you can start asking, you can start asking, okay, how do spiders build a web? Or you can start asking, do all spiders build a web? Right? So these kinds of questions can be raised at the undergrad level. The other thing what you can do is with these insects and spiders are that you can compare. You can say that, okay, this particular insect does this. What about some other insect? So when I was talking about butterflies and caterpillars, right? So you can say that, okay, butterfly takes, it drinks nectar from flowers. It has a curled up tongue. So it's almost like a hose pipe, which is kind of curled up. So whenever it wants, it takes out that hose pipe kind of a tongue and it puts it into the flower. But how does a fly drink nectar, or how does a fly use its tongue? So you can teach like a comparative anatomy and physiology through these insects and spiders. So you can use them as model organisms to teach a lot of different courses. So you can teach them about ecology, you can teach them about neurobiology, you can teach. So all these things are actually quite important and also very useful. They come in handy, and it's not like these are very expensive either. You can just walk across and find something very novel and then bring it to the lab, observe these things, and students get really excited because they would not have heard about these things. They're not in any textbooks. Textbooks give you facts, but the ability to ask questions doesn't come through that. Only when you start, thinking outside the kind of a framework will give you a chance. So I'm not saying that this is only restricted to undergrads. Of course, a kid who's, who has these kinds of exposure will also be able to do all these kinds of things. But as a faculty at APU, this is what I enjoy the most. We allow students to kind of, get used to insects and spiders, use those things as model organisms to ask very many questions. And that's where Saroja and Carol, what Shashwat was telling you earlier, these were two undergrad students who worked on social spiders. They looked at how, if you starve these social spiders, meaning you bring in social spiders and then you don't give them food at all. We'll talk about social spiders. Maybe I can show you a little picture. Are we doing okay on time?
Yes, Divya, I think it's fine. Yeah, it's 5:40. We have that last question remaining to cover.
Yeah.
But no, go.
So
I think you should show the picture.
Yeah. Can you see the picture? Can you see the?
Yeah, it's coming.
Slides? Yeah. Okay. So this is the social spider, one social spider, one individual of a picture. But basically, this is how they look. Their webs look like very messy, and it looks like a bird nest actually, but it's really messy bird nest. And they cover entire plants sometimes. And basically, these are found in Bangalore. You don't have to go to some thick forest. These are found in a lot of places in Bangalore. Any abandoned, dump yard kind of a thing, you will go and you'll see these social spiders thriving. Why we keep talking about social spiders is they're quite rare. There are around 30 species in the world. Out of 50,000 social spiders, there are only 30 of them which are social, and we have few species in India. So, but what we can do is we can bring them to the lab and then kind of manipulate their behavior, and we can ask, okay, how do they hunt together? They are social, so they have this kind of a collective behavior where here they're catching a grasshopper. Many spiders come together and catch this grasshopper. So how do they do that? And we can also see, whether they also perform other collective behaviors such as web building. So how do they build webs together? Do they cooperate? They are known as cooperative spiders. Do they really cooperate? Or, is it just that they're just living together, but they're individuals as themselves? Are they really cooperative or not? We can ask various kinds of questions. And one advantage we have sitting in India is that we know so little about insects and spiders that almost whatever you come across is something new, and we can start questioning and reading about it and studying them. So I'll just stop there, and then maybe we can move on to about if anybody who is interested in knowing a little bit more about spiders or insects. Okay, we are not really we don't want to kind of say you should only look at spiders and insects. Of course, we are fond of them. But anybody who wants to look into natural history of various organisms, it's really India right now. There is a lot of interest. It's not like 20 years back where there was we only knew about big animals. Things have changed a lot, and I want Vena to talk a little bit about these kinds of opportunities for audiences who are just getting into this kind of interest.
Thanks, Divya. Maybe I'll just quickly, Shashwat's kind of given me a clue to maybe break it up with a quick joke, but I just wanted to share an anecdote, a story with you, because the first time I met Divya was in 2001, when we both overlapped in ISC and CES, and I had a fellowship for 2 months, and Divya was, in a lab next door. And I remember my mom had come to visit me, and we were in the canteen in ISC. And she overheard us kind of peering down on something and saying, wow, he looks so good, he's so handsome. How amazing is he looking? And my mom, came by and she told me this later, saying that I thought, oh gosh, finally my daughter's looking at a boy's picture and gushing over somebody. Maybe these friends of hers are good for her. And then when she came close to what we were seeing, we had this ant mimic spider in a vial, and this is gorgeous looking male ant mimic with these long kind of chelicerae, and he was prancing around, and we were all gushing over that. And I still remember that very well, and my mom still remembers that incident as well. But that's a way she got interested as well, in some sense, right? So she looks a little bit more at the insects that visit her garden in Chennai. And she now knows that she shouldn't prune and chop and have only pretty flowers, but she lets it grow wild a little bit. And so usually that's a way to start, right? To tell yourself not to get overwhelmed or think, gosh, I actually don't know anything. How do I start? I haven't studied science. We all started without knowing anything, right? You've heard all our stories. It's just that we started a few years back, maybe, and so we have a little bit more experience in terms of where to look, how to look, what clues to look for. And then, therefore, that gives us a little confidence to, give you this gyan. And so we also gave Shashwat a bit of a difficult time a few days back for calling us experts. So we all continue learning from current research which other people are doing, from books that are coming out now. Like Divya pointed out, there are so many more books out there now which we can look at and refer. So much online resources that we didn't have access to when we first started out. There are lots of discussion groups, WhatsApp groups, Instagram groups that are constantly putting pictures and observations out there. So join these groups if you can. Get as many books that are available. Even if they are books from abroad, it's okay. Lots of the spiders and insects that you get in other countries, you'll at least, the broad level of up to the group or family level is what you would find. So these are some of the books I refer to. Don't immediately try and start to identify them. That's difficult. It takes a little bit of time to understand patterns, see the logic behind, why a body shape is like this. What is it that you can compare and contrast it with? Do that, and it's a much more rewarding kind of an experience doing that. You'll start seeing patterns yourself, and you'll come to a more logical conclusion about why a particular group is a beetle and what you're looking at is an ant and not a spider. Why does this ant look bigger than the other ant? What kind of nest is this ant building, but why is this ant going under the tree bark? And those kind of notes and observations, as much as you can take, really, really helps at least start in the beginning, and also while you're doing your walks and taking pictures as well. So having a camera now with a phone with a good camera now is really nice. But sometimes what happens is, in our quest to take that picture, we lose out on these other important details. So try and take that picture, because it's useful to bring it back and to see how to refer to what you have back online or at home, but also look, cross-check it with other information always. And books on papers that are accessible online, persist and look at what other people are saying. Look at people's personal blogs, but always try and see if this is something found in our geographical location, right? What we're also seeing, all three of us, is that right now, a lot of people are using Google Lens, right? And it's great that there's this tool available to us, and INAT. But what happens is, all these kind of apps and programs are reliant on artificial intelligence, right? So it's what other people are inputting that it'll give you that information. And so if there are many more observations from North America, for example, and if you find a beetle in your backyard in Bangalore or Chennai or Hyderabad, that's what it might show you. And then you'll say, oh, this is the species. So use some of these tools as your guides, but always cross-check it with other books that are available, or ask people who who have been studying and documenting these to see whether you're right or not. And it's okay to make mistakes. It's fine. That's the way we all learn. So a combination of online resources, your apps, and the good old kind of ID books which are available and whatever's available. Many more are coming out now, which is really nice to see. My friend and colleague Kartikeyan will be bringing out a book of common spiders in India, which will be out in a few months, I think. Me and another colleague were bringing out, a flashcard set on common insects and spiders that you find in Bangalore city, thanks to the Bangalore Sustainability Forum. They gave us a small grant to do that. John is constantly doing workshops, so you should attend those. We offer, whenever we can, walks and talks to any interested people, right? So, and one quick thing before I end and give it over to Divya and John is that start by creating a sense of wonder and awe, right? And people pick up on this, and they often will then start to share your enthusiasm. Spend some time with something that you have spotted. Ask yourself questions. Oh, what is that? A wasp that is sleeping? Why is it holding on to something and sleeping like that? What is that particular ant doing? Why is it going in and out of that hole? What is it carrying in its mouth? Ask these questions, and you'll really, a whole new world will kind of open out to you. Also try and keep areas in your garden or in your balconies as wild as possible, right? We have this image of what a garden and balcony plant should look like. Often they're, these pretty little pots sitting side by side, often with these showy big flowers. These are great, but intersperse them with, messy plants. Let things grow. Let weeds come up by itself. Because there are various creatures that also require these kind of weeds and shrubs and herbs and creepers. And we did have a few images to show you, because in our cities, especially our waysides and even our medians, used to have a rich diversity of plants earlier. But now that's slowly being cut, and these pruned, silly-looking plants are now being kind of put in the medians, which have no function. Actually, they may look pretty to some people, but they're actually doing nothing for supporting other kind of life in the cities as well. Divya, if we have some time, we can show that one picture of the calotropis that I had one slide just to show how one plant, it's called the yakamara in Canada, and it's a common wayside plant. If you look online, it will say it's typically found in wastelands and in dry areas. And it's just amazing how much this one plant, which just grows, this one, which just grows wild in open plots. And really, we should be, allowing these to grow much more. Just in that one plant, we have so far documented 25 plus species, and we're finding more. So there are insects which use it. There are spiders that use it. When there is a big seed pod that it has, and when it splits open, the seeds have these fuzzy, cottony-like things, and those seeds are wind dispersed. But the cotton-like things that are stuck to the seed are used by birds, especially sunbirds, to line their nests. And it's so fascinating that this one plant provides so much of function to so many things. Thanks, I'll keep quiet now. Sorry, John, go ahead.
John, you want to quickly, very quickly,
Here's my
in a
elevator
minute
pitch,
or
guys.
two, tell us.
So no, basically, I think from this idea of where can you start, with the sake of quickly breaking through this. Well, for me, I was fortunate enough to be surrounded by people who sort of shared these interests and sort of were immersed in the sort of mindset, right, of having empathy for different kinds of life forms, if you will, which really makes a difference, because some of those perspectives are easy when you have somebody who already knows some of this stuff. So where I'm coming from is, well, I'm not saying go out and make a new friend. Well, maybe do, um, but it's good to sort of seek out people when you go through this process. So let's say you see a spider, let's say you see an ant, you're curious about it. There are n number of sort of groups on different forms of social media, right? Like coming from Bangalore, I know there's a very active group called the Karnataka Spider Club. There's a lovely bunch of people who are constantly discussing stuff about spiders. In fact, sometimes I'm curious where they find that much time, but it's just incredible to see that kind of passion for spiders. Um, and so if you can sort of find these groups, find a way to sort of get to know them, these questions are best asked there, because while, like when I was saying, like some of these tools are really helpful, whether it's iNet or Google Lens or even a book for that matter. But as you're starting out, and I can sort of say this from personal experience, is you'll open the book, you'll look at it, and you're like, yeah, that's the spider, no, that's the wasp. And you'll find out that that wasp was seen by, I don't know, Julius Caesar the third, back when he was into natural history or something like that, and never been seen since then. But you'll be absolutely certain that was the wasp in your garden. So to sort of reduce the chances of that happening at the early stage, reach out to people, sort of talk to them. If, like when I was saying, and this is the part where I do some shady self promotion, but if there are workshops happening inside the city, right, that educate you on some of these smaller life forms, see if you can sort of immerse yourself in those. When you travel to different places, if there are local guides who are sort of immersed in the natural environment there, talk to them, ask them what the sort of flora fauna of that place is. This is a very good chance they'll give you a sort of way to experience that space in a way you would have never imagined. Whether it's a tide pool at a beach or a small garden that's inside a city, there's a lot of magic waiting there to be discovered. So yeah, be like a social spider and go ask somebody for help.
All right. Thanks, John. Yeah, so there are some questions. Shashwat, is this a good time for us to take some questions? Or maybe
We have about 7-8 minutes left, I think, so we can potentially take
questions, right? Okay. So Vijeta is asking, why do you think there's so little that we know about the insects? In all the years of study in school and college, there's so little taught about them. Vijeta, that's a good question. So mostly the textbooks are written in a way which is, applicable to humans. So whatever it's useful for humans. So we will know about butterflies as pollinators, and at the most butterflies and bees as pollinators. Bees give us honey, but people won't know that honey is also, bees use their, bees collect pollen and nectar from various flowers to feed their own little ones. And they use, bees are basically using their saliva to kind of make this honey. So when I say that, students really get grossed, because they don't think that, okay, it's bees' own spit, that honey that they're eating is coming out of bees' spit. But so these kinds of things, which is the biology of it is not really taught in school, because it's only application based. So for environmental textbooks, it will be like, yes, pollinators are important, and there'll be a picture of bees or butterflies, and that's it. So it's not known. And also not just schools, I think also at home, we are always cleaning up things. We want to keep our homes free of insects and spiders and various other small things, right? So parents are also not very comfortable in saying that, okay, let that spider be, and or ask the kid to say that, okay, here is something, why don't we observe it? I have never grown up in a household like that. I'm sure none of us have grown in a household like that, where parents are kind of, it's always like, okay, there's a cockroach, let's kill it, or there's an ant, let's spray something, right? So it is very human-centric approach to studying these things. So I think that's the reason why we don't hear about too much of insects and spiders. Um,
If, can I add to that, Divya?
Take
Right
one more
here.
question.
Can I add to that, Divya?
Yeah,
Just
So
to
you can
Divya,
add.
kind of
just
Yeah,
follow up.
just to add to
Yeah.
that point,
one of
Sorry, I
you.
think there's a lag. Um, yeah, so also to just to give you the example of the butterflies, right? And because that's often what we have in our mind when we talk about insects, and that's the typical example given in our books. So we all love butterflies, right? There are very few of us who don't like butterflies. And then we know about the butterfly caterpillar stage, right? But so many of us, get very upset when we see a caterpillar chomping on the leaves of the plants in our homes. Plants that we've grown up, that we've allowed to grow with so much love. And often it's like, why are these caterpillars chewing up my plants? It's removed and things like that. So we've learned that butterflies, have to go through that stage. But when it comes to our own kind of lived experience, we often disassociate the fact that in order to become a butterfly, that fat, juicy caterpillar needs food. And that food is often the plants that you have in your balconies or things that are around you. And, and that was a picture I showed in one of when Vidya had kind of showed in the slides, that, we have this beautiful nerium plants which grow again quite wild around us. A lot of people plant it in their gardens, and they love it when they see the large oleander butterfly coming out. But they really hate it when they see the caterpillars of the same uh, butterfly chomping on the leaves. And it's called a oleander hawk moth. Sorry, it's actually a moth, not a butterfly, but it's called an oleander hawk moth because that butterfly needs to eat the leaves of the oleander plant. And I've seen so many people removing them, taking them out, cursing them, saying, why are so many caterpillars eating up my plant? So the next time when you see things in your garden or in your balcony plants, look at it and see the kind of stuff which is happening on it and why is it, using those plants, and try and form a narrative and a story to understand why that's happening. Go ahead, John.
Can we?
just to sort of add to that point and sort of segue into the biomimicry aspect, um, to that question on why we sort of spend so little time, another interesting, at least perspective for me was, I work with a lot of kids across different geographies and different spaces, right? Usually, when I'm chatting with kids from the cities, I have this whole planned sort of setup where I'm like, hey, do you know why spiders are important? Most of them come up with some interesting answers, um, but they're not often sort of, all there. When I talk to kids from rural areas, local communities that still sort of live in a close connection with nature, their answers seem to be so much more intuitive, right? They start talking about, hey, of course we need spiders. Their answers seem to be so much more intuitive, right? They start talking about, hey, of course we need spiders. They eat our crop. That sort of ecological connection that we are seeing may also and having to depend on a textbook and a biology class to understand the natural world around us is in itself, well, you see what's happening there. And from that perspective, right, in terms of understanding use, um, it's also very interesting to see biomimicry in some aspects. Some of my favorite examples, at least, are how in architecture, a lot of architects are now copying how a termite mound is set up, right? So when a termite mound is set up, what happens is they need to sort of regulate the temperature inside the mound such that the queen who's at the bottom stays relatively cool in the sweltering heat of day. So they actually have a natural air conditioning system. And the way the air flows through actually keeps the lower halves of the mound cool and warm air rises up. So there's this wonderful convection based air conditioning system. And that's actually been used in architecture to solve for energy issues, cutting costs by around 30% if my numbers are somewhat approximate. And so there are use cases like that, or in the cases of spiders, their silk is actually being used in medicine, right? To see if their silk can be used as an alternative to tissue regeneration, media that we currently use. So those are some of the things that I could think of. If Divya and Vena also have some examples of biomimicry.
We
I
can't
think your
hear you,
internet's a
John.
bit, yeah, your internet's a bit choppy, John. I think we lost you
You are
towards the end.
muted, actually.
Yeah,
Hello, can you hear me
yeah,
now?
yeah. There was a bit of a lag, but
Oh,
it's okay now. Yeah.
okay. I
Yeah.
went on a whole monologue. At what point did you
No, no,
guys
no.
lose
Just
me?
the last bit. You were fine. You were fine. Yeah, you're okay.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
You are
sure.
getting
Divya, do
into
you?
mimicry.
Oh, right. Oh,
I think Chayant has a question as well. Considering how little is known, what are some good ways to document interesting phenomena or behaviors from these underrepresented groups beyond typical platforms? Chayant, I would say right now blogs are the best way to do it. And I find I use Twitter. The only social media I use is Twitter. So I find sometimes putting up these kind of interesting, fascinating things that I am coming across and learning myself. It's good to kind of, to put that up and also to then see if you can document it in the form of a blog, your own blog, and then, share it with people. But you're right. I think it's time to kind of document these a little bit more in a formal space. And hopefully some of us can get together and do that soon. It's high
Actually,
time we have, it's high time we have some stories and a book or even, an article about fascinating natural history information about the things that are around us.
so another way to kind of document these would be to do slightly formal studies. So one is to take, to say that, oh wow, we have seen something very nice, and then take it to next level and say that, okay, I'll do a slightly formal study, and that's where you can you'll have to stick with it. So that's where I think like a formal study documentation would turn into a maybe like a small note or something, small paper or something like that. So there are different ways of going about it.
Somebody also asked if we can make a living, I think, studying spiders and insects, but
Well,
it's an interesting question.
India is
Yeah.
not reached
Yeah.
that stage. I think you can make a living by being a naturalist, not just studying spiders and insects. But I know that abroad, so there is enough, there is enough research labs which study insects and spiders, and there are these places which kind of go out and collect enough number of these bugs, and there are companies which supply these insects and spiders to various labs. But that is US, which I'm talking about. In India, that is not the case. But see, all three of us do study insects and spiders, but we have other things going on. But as a standalone job, it's a little difficult to kind of, we can use that to, either in academics or as a, to, or in education, we can use these and make a living. Yes.
Shashwat, you said, is there one more question or should we? I think we're beyond time. Otherwise,
there is a need to empower the teachers, educators, so that they can reach out to more children. Besides the outreach of research institutes, the outreach of research needs to improve. Why not connect both to empower educators? Absolutely. I think all three of us can reply to that question. Yes, I think every organization has to do a lot more. So right now there is a divide between what happens in universities. There is not close to very little outreach, and we fail to kind of communicate the exciting stuff what we do at the university level. And also, as you have rightly said in the question, that even at the school level, the teachers themselves probably they can use a little bit more of nature, nature in the city kind of a approach, rather than okay, what is there in the textbook kind of approach. Absolutely, yeah, we need to do a lot more to bring and to connect these two things together. So I'll just tell you a very, very quick example. So as a grad student, this is again in my lab. So as a student, I used to take, help my advisor to take various butterflies and insects and spiders to classrooms, and we used to do show and tell and talk about life cycle of these animals. Those kinds of things don't happen too much in India, or maybe it's just beginning to happen. But that was really common in the US. I'm not saying we should do everything what they're doing, but we have a lot more opportunities here to do any of these things.
Yeah, and I think Shashwat was saying a lot of schools seem to be may have joined this talk. Even if you're in a school which doesn't have too much of green space, inside your campus or even outside, you will still find things, and that's the advantage of I think spiders and insects. They really are so diverse that you will find them in all sorts of habitats. If you go to a small room that's not been used for a long time, if you look at the ceilings or if you look at the corners of the walls, you will find 3 or 4 species. You will find the tent-webbed spider, which I told you about when we first started the talk. You look at walls. You will find all sorts of things on that. The reduid assassin bug nymph will be there. Bagworm moths will be there. Spiders, jumping spiders are crouching looking for things will be there. Two-tailed spiders that are cryptic and so well camouflaged will be there. Divya and I have the advantage of being short, so we also find many more things, in the shrubby and herb area. And we rely on John, who's much taller, to look at the barks of trees that are above our reach. So just go for a walk by yourself, start looking for things. Like John was also saying, and Divya was saying, that go with one person who's a little familiar in the beginning, and you'll then start to get the hang of it. You'll start finding clues yourself, and start getting fascinated by this world. It's hidden, but also not so hidden when you start finding them.
All right. I think if there are, I don't see any other question.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Yeah. We hope you enjoyed the session.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Shashwat, for hosting this and asking us to do this. Thank you, John and Vena, for this. Is, as I said earlier, it was just nice to be together for this an hour or so and kind of share our experiences. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone. Yeah. Bye, John. Bye.